outside? Should I run and hide? How do I take my company worldwide? Do you love the law? Did you watch Hee-Haw? What's the weirdest thing that you ever saw? What's it like in court? Favorite sport? Can you help with my book report? Is my hair too long? Am I right or wrong? And do you mind if I sing along to anything? Ask Alan anything in the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Ask Alan, the podcast. I'm Alan Crone, the CEO of the Crone Law Firm, and I've got a very special guest with me today, Michael Zellner, who is a great entrepreneur here in town. And many of you may have known his dad, who was a doctor, a podiatrist in town, was my podiatrist, was my great friends with my dad, and so I know he comes from good stock. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining the program.
Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it. Thanks for saying that about my dad. He loved your dad too. Yeah,
just one of the nicest, funniest guys I've ever met. Your dad. So, thank you. Let's talk about you. Tell me a little bit about where I know you grew up in and around Memphis, and just a little bit about the early years of your life. How did it affect you in wanting to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I grew up here in Memphis. I lived here my whole entire life. Went to Ridgeway Elementary and Ridgeway High School. And then went to, at the time, of course, it was Memphis State back when I went there. Had, a good childhood. Thankfully, I was raised by, as you mentioned, two parents that were, loved me unconditionally, no matter how many times I messed up, which is very good. And because that was many times. And so, I had a great childhood with that. I had a lot of friends. This is back in the time when we played outside and you rode your bike around, and, you didn't worry about some of the things that we worry about today. So just had a lot of fun as a kid.
Were you entrepreneurial as a youngster?
Not super entrepreneurial as a youngster. I mean, my first job I ever had was I had a paper route, and I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and I wasn't entrepreneurial then, as I remember I was so lazy. I didn't want to do it. I remember my mom used to have to go through the paper sometimes for me. And then finally my parents were like, all right, that's it. That's not going to happen anymore. My entrepreneurial spirit really sort of came out when I was 18 and started selling Cutco knives, when I was in college. And that's how it really got started from there.
What led to that? I mean, how do you decide, okay, I'm going to sell Cutco knives?
Well, it's actually a real interesting story. I talk a lot about, the power of a moment. A friend of mine, you might know, another attorney, Stephen Sauer. Mm-hmm. We were Michael Tias, another friend of mine, and Stephen Sauer and I were all downtown selling parking places for Memphis in May. And because Michael's dad had a couple lots down there, and Stephen Sauer was reading the newspaper, classified ads, ran across this little ad that said, hey, college students, $8.25 to start. Tore the little piece of paper out and said, hey, here's the, call, you need a job, call this, company. Didn't know who it was, didn't say anything. So I went home. This is back in the time that I didn't do my laundry. I had the little piece of paper in my pocket. Thankfully, my mom checked my pockets before she washed the clothes. So she pulled that little piece of paper out, because had she not done that, my whole life would have been different. That one little moment. I called and went in for an advertisement for the job, went in and got the job, and, started going through training and got started. And honestly, I really took the job just to have a job, to satisfy my parents. I did not think it would lead to where it led.
And so tell me about that experience. How, sales is tough no matter what you're selling, but you're selling high-end knives.
Right.
How did you approach that?
Well, it was really tough at first. I was not good. I didn't have any confidence at all. I mean, I think I sold like one out of my first 17 customers. It was my great aunt who bought like a little turning fork. I mean, it was almost nothing. I didn't know how to close. I didn't really put forth the effort until I had this one customer that ended up buying like 100 pocket knives for Christmas gifts for his law firm. And that changed everything. And then it started giving me confidence and started doing well. And, and I sold for 3 years the product here in Memphis. And then I ended up opening up an office here and ran a branch office, and then was a district manager for 5 years. And it's a great experience. The knives are phenomenal. The company's just exploded now. I mean, back when I sold, the most expensive set was like around $700. Now it's like $2,400, and they have so much more stuff. But, I tell anybody, if you're looking for some really good experience, Cutco is an amazing time. And it really brought me out of my shell. I went from a real shy, quiet person to very outgoing that, you can't shut me up.
Well, yeah, you talk about the guy who bought 100 knives for his law firm as Christmas presents. I think that's the thing that is interesting to me in sales, is really figuring out where your market is, because with knives, you would think your market is, homemakers or families, but probably it's not that. You're selling to people who are given the knives as presents or something else. Was that your experience?
I first thought it was going to be that way, because that's what happened, because I wasn't doing well. And then that happened. I'll never forget. It was Marlene Gerson, her husband, Herb Gerson, I think was a labor lawyer. Mm-hmm. And that's who bought it for, all these Christmas gifts and everything for his firm. And then I started getting into where I started selling homemakers. I remember my first big sale, and that gave me confidence. And then it turned into where I started seeing mostly housewives during the day. And, and I sold probably 70% of the people that I saw. I was not high pressure. The product sold itself. And I made a lot of money when I was in college. I was making, $500, $600, $700 a week while going to school full time and working maybe 15, 20 hours, because I worked my way up in the company and was able to get to the highest level in sales.
So what was the first business that you started that was your business as opposed to working for somebody else?
Not the first business that I started was the mattress business, but after Cutco, I actually got into the bar business for 4 years, completely different end of the spectrum. Yeah. And the little college bar on the Highland Strip, it was first called the Oasis, and then we changed the name to the Library. It was a live music bar, a lot of fun business to be around. Live music was great, but the bar business, I just didn't like it. Didn't make money.
It's a tough business.
It is very tough.
I tip my hat to anybody who can make a success at a bar or a restaurant, but because for a lot of reasons, those are really, really tough businesses.
It is. And it was selling cheap beer to college students, and in all transparency, it was mostly 18 to 20-year-olds. You had to sell them at that time in order to stay in business. And that pressure of worrying about that and all that, it just, it wasn't worth it. And so I ended up getting out of that business, and I ended up starting my own mattress business in 2000 and got into that business. A friend of mine was selling mattresses in Los Angeles, and he said, "Hey, there's this company you can buy some mattresses from. You rent a couple of storage units, you place little classified ads, your phone will ring." I'm like, "That's not going to work." Because it works. Believe me, it works. Wow. I said, "How much do I need to get started?" He goes, "About 10,000. I said, "Well, I don't have that." So I went to my dad and asked him to borrow $10,000, told him what I would be doing. And he gave me that look like, "Are you insane? That's not going to work." He goes, "I'll tell you what, I'll give you 5. If you can make it work with 5, I'll do it." So he gave me $5,000. I rented 2 storage units at Storage USA on Mount Moriah, next to used to be Buck and Bass and Hooters over there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Rented 2 storage units. I had one of them was inventory. The other one, I had like 3 mattresses set up on frames up against the wall. That was my showroom. Placed the ads. The phone rang off the hook. And I met people over there by appointment. And that's how I initially got started in the business, doing it that way.
Wow. Wow. I think that the lesson for young entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs is that making money it doesn't have to be glamorous.
Right.
In fact, some of the best things you can sell are very, very mundane. And mattresses are important, but they're kind of mundane. And it just shows that what hustle and the right business plan will do for you.
Absolutely. And, honestly, I didn't have really any kind of business plan. I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do at first, and as I got into it and realized this is going really well, selling out of the storage unit, I put together a business plan, ended up 6 months later renting my first, retail space over a Cherry and American Way, a little shopping center. It was over there, and still ran the ads, still did it by appointment, but it started to grow from there. So I had a small space for about a year, about 1,500 square feet, and it continued to grow. And then the next year I grew to a space that was 6,000 square feet. And so, it just started to become very, very successful.
How many locations did you still have that business?
I do not have that business anymore.
Did you sell it?
I got out of that business. Well, I've had two separate ones. The first one I had was called Z's Warehouse. And then I ended up years later opening up Sleepy Z's.
Now that's the one I remember.
Right. That's right. That's the one most recently. Z's Warehouse was around from 2000 to 2008. It expanded from mattresses into I had carried all kinds of furniture, got into hot tubs, pool tables, was doing really, really well until the market, turned in 2007. And, when business went down, I ended up having to close in 2008. I did another business for a little while. And then back in 2010, I started all over again, renting storage unit, started, from scratch again. Said, all right, I could do it a second time if I did it the first time, and did that for a few years before I opened up the retail location at on Witten Road right there at Witten in Summer in 2013.
How talk about the mental discipline it took to go back to the beginning in the same business?
It was humbling, because, I'd filed bankruptcy back in 1997, had to move back home, had to give up a really nice car, had to share a car with my parents. And that was hard. And then to have it happen in a sense again, in 2010, to have to go back to the beginning and start all over again after I had my store at Winchester and Mendenhall was the last location I had at Z's Warehouse. It was the old giant Piggly Wiggly building at Winchester Mendenhall. I owned that building. It was like 60,000 square feet. I mean, I had this plan. I had half of it was my store. The other half I was going to rent out. I'd make enough money to cover my note. Things were going well till the market turned. So to go from 60,000 square feet to 210 by 30 units again was very, very difficult. But I was just determined that I was going to make it work again. Because like I said, I knew that it worked the first time. And now I had the addition of having also not only ads in the paper with Craigslist too, where I advertised. It worked really well the second time.
Well, and that's what a lot of people who aren't entrepreneurs don't really realize is, the most successful people have been up and they've been down, but what they share with you is determination and humility to be able to go back and do it again. There aren't a lot of people that have that kind of discipline and humility to do that.
Yeah. And, like you said, anyone who's successful has failed many times. Any kind of business person, opening up, whether it's a retail location, a restaurant, a bar, whatever it is, they have failed before. And you just have to figure out a way to pick yourself back up. Sometimes people are able to do it on their own. Sometimes they need help. I had probably a combination, I would say, of both of them. But just having that word determination, I would agree with that. That's the main word, is just to be determined that you can make it work.
Yeah. And to just be better tomorrow than you are today.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, tell me what you think about this, but I think a lot of people think that either they're, not successful or they're Fred Smith,
right.
And it takes, there's a lot between those 2 points. And tell me about that middle part. How do you navigate that middle part?
That can be really difficult sometimes because you see the success of obviously someone like, and Fred Smith is a perfect example of someone that was told your business plan isn't going to work. He was told that in college, and obviously when we looked to see what that person was wrong, that professor. And, I would say I had delusions of grandeur. I honestly thought my initial business when I was at Z's Warehouse, I was going to be this multimillionaire from that business. I really thought that. And we were doing $1.5 million in sales the last few years before the market turned. And, and even when I got into Sleepy Z's, our last full year, we did, a few $1 million in sales. The average person looks at that from the outside and, you did that. You're a millionaire. You did that much in sales. They don't understand there's a lot behind that and the expenses. You see all the money coming in, you don't see all the money that's going out. And it really is hard because, I wanted to grow Sleepy Z's even more, and was not able to do that. And honestly, I got sick at the end, and and had two pulmonary embolisms in 2018, which really messed me up mentally, and it caused a big chain reaction where I had to close in July of 2019. But I I was never good at handling money. That was my downfall. And if you're not good at handling, I mean, as much business as we were doing, I should have been able to grow that business even larger, and have another location or two. But I wasn't able to do it because I was not a good money manager. I was a good branding person, promoter, marketer, all that kind of thing. But you have to have that. Obviously, that money, managing your money is super important. So I learned the hard way.
Yes, you and I are similar, I think, in that we're both kind of visionaries and big picture guys, and that's an indication you need that implementer, you need that detail person to help support the weakness that you've got, and that's the way it is with me. I've got real detail oriented people on the business side here that if I didn't have them, I know I would be up the creek.
Right. And it's no fault of anyone but myself, but, I hired someone, an accountant, to come in to help me and to work on that stuff there. And, my dad always accused me of being, you're way too trusting of people. You trust people way too easily. And that's my fault. That's true. But that person ended up hurting me even more. And I should have been on top of that a little bit more. I trusted what I was being told was the truth. And if I had been on top of that and stopped that situation, it wouldn't have been what it was. But I didn't. And that person did what they did, but it was my fault for not being on top of it and taking care of the situation. So, yeah, I would tell everybody, you have to have all the aspects of it. You have to have that plan to where not only do you have the plan to where you figure out what kind of business you want to do and where you want to do it, but you better have a really good budget and be able to manage it well.
So what's Mike Zellner doing now?
So about 8 months ago, I started a podcast called Think Big with Michael Zellner. I had the idea last winter, and I started reaching out to people. I reached out probably to 30 or 40 people to send a text, say, hey, I want to start this podcast. I want it to be all positive, no politics involved, because there's enough negativity out there in the world. Would you consider coming on as a guest? And almost everybody told me yes. So I started the podcast in June. I got help from somebody because, I am not good at all the technical stuff. Now I know how to do it, but I didn't. I was crash trained in like 2 weeks. You need this equipment. This is what you need to record, how to download, how to upload, all those things. And so, I've started doing the podcast, and I tell you what, it has been so much fun, and it's opened so many more doors, and I've made so many friends from it now, people that I've interviewed that now are become friends. It has really been, it's been so exciting.
Well, that's great. So it sounds like, so is it, when you say think big, is it just business? Or are you looking at other endeavors? What's the scope of the podcast?
So I bring on people from all different areas of life. I've had on, successful, basketball coaches, basketball players, athletes, business people, restaurant owners, mindfulness trainers, all over the spectrum. Some of the most interesting guests I've had lots of them. I just recorded like 100, I've done 106 episodes, sort of like I've done a ton real quick. And one of the most fun interview I had with Mark Goodfellow. And I only knew Mark from his television commercials and seeing him on television, the Grizzly and Tigers games, and such a charismatic guy. And then I have him on my podcast, and I saw a completely different side of him. Like, he's a very caring, emotional, really good person. And it just amazes me how, you can have one image of somebody one way, and then you have them, when you meet them, and then have them and realize that they're a lot more than that. So he's been a lot of fun. I got to reminisce with Andre Turner, had him on, talking about the 85 Final Four team and things like that. Eric Hasseltine talking about the Grizzlies. My friend Greg Graber, who's a mindfulness trainer and coach who works with a lot of college teams in Memphis and across the country. So, people from all different areas, because everybody has a really good story to share. And so what I'm trying to do is bring on guests and bring out good stories so someone can take something away from it to relate to their life.
No, I think that's great. You talk about Mark Goodfellow. I grew up with Mark over in Arkansas, And I didn't know him all that well, but I think he is one of the most brilliant marketers in
Absolutely.
Memphis. As you say, the persona that he's created, and he really hasn't done much, advertising lately because he's built such a great brand. But what I love about his brand is that it's authentic to him, because that tagline, "I don't care about your credit, I care about you." He really does care about people.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't think you can say that into a camera if you really don't care about people.
And and not knowing him before, seeing that, you just think, oh, it's another television commercial. Mm-hmm. And when I was referred to him, to have him come on my podcast and everything, I was told by my friend that referred me, "No, you're going to see a completely different side. Like what that guy says on TV is exactly what he means. He does care about people." And you're absolutely right, he does. And I thought I was great at branding, and building a business. That guy is a just complete professional.
Yes. And he does so many of the little things right. His social media and the television stuff. And then, just he's courtside at the Grizzlies. I mean, it's a carefully curated brand, but it's authentic to who he is.
It definitely is. Yeah. And I found that out, just him talking about his mom and how much he loved his mother, that she passed away several years ago. I mean, he just got very emotional during the podcast, and just that real person came out. It was pretty incredible.
So, where can people catch the podcast? It's Think Big, right?
Yes. Think Big with Michael Zellner. They can, watch it on YouTube. I have a Facebook page. Also they can, catch it on a TikTok page and Instagram. And then they can listen to it if they just want to listen on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, most of the audio platforms too.
Good. Well, we'll make sure we put that out so people can see it
Awesome.
when we finally prepare this. So what's the future hold? What plans can you talk about?
Well, I have my plan is actually to build this podcast even bigger. I'm just excited. I got my first sponsor that just starting this week. Platinum Jewelers here in Memphis is sponsoring. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. So, and just plan to build it bigger and bigger. And, one of the things I've done is I actually now have, people that are asking to come on the show too, not just me reaching out. And I've reached a really, wide audience, because I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll go on Instagram and I'll ask if I think someone's interesting or something. I'll ask anyone. I don't care if they're a big actor, whoever it is. Like I reached out to a guy. It's the Ring Boxing magazine. Like, he's in charge of the magazine. It's like the biggest boxing magazine in the world. He came on the show. And I mean, I figured, what do I have to lose? I mean, where's somebody could tell me no? And, and so I've gotten more yeses than nos. Like I just interviewed a woman named Kathleen McClellan. People wouldn't know her just by name, but she's been on tons of TV shows back in the 90s. She was on season 9, episode 9 of Seinfeld. I don't know if you watched Seinfeld or not, but it was where she was naked. Of course, she wasn't naked, but she was naked per se during the whole episode in Jerry's apartment. The episode was called The Apology. James Spader was in it. And she was a real pretty blonde that was naked in it. And I saw her on Instagram and I reached out to her, and, she came on the show. So, you just never know. You got to ask. Right.
And, and that's such a great lesson for, business people, whether they're veteran or just starting out, is take the risk, take the chance. You just never know. You just never know what where you get those doors open a little bit, where it could lead.
Absolutely, and that it goes back to where I started with Cutco. Everything sort of came full circle there back to the beginning, because I was afraid to ask for the order when I started. That's why I did not sell anything. And when I made that sell, this 100 pocket knives, I'll never forget. I was sitting there with Marlene Gerson. And I showed her the product. I didn't ask for the order. Of course, they're not going to say, okay, I'll buy it. And I'm thinking, oh, they live in a super nice house. They can afford it. That's the mindset of an 18-year-old.
Right.
And so at the very end, I'm packing everything up, and she just starts glancing through the back of the prospectus, and she comes across some gifts, and she came across that pocket knife. She goes, this is really nice. This might make a really nice gift for my husband's law firm. And she goes, I wish I could see it. And it happened to be, out of probably 20 gifts in the back of that book, the one thing that I had, it was a little white case in my bag I'd won in a contest at the office, that one little thing. If I hadn't had it, I never would have made that sale. I gave it to her. She said, "Can you leave this with me for a couple of days?" I did. And she called me 2 days later and says, he wants 100 of them and wants them engraved. That week, I was #1 in sales in the whole company nationwide. It changed everything for me, but it was right. It was asking, and I didn't ask for that order. And it was her taking the initiative with that pocket knife. But, it taught me that you're right. You have to ask it and just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very good, Michael. We're running out of time. I appreciate your time on the show. And I'll just tell you, if you're listening to this, check out his podcast, because there's no better entrepreneur in this town than Michael Zellner. He's done it from the ground up, and it sounds like you've got some great guests. I'm going to go check it out this afternoon. We're taping this during Ice-Geddon here in Memphis.
Right.
The whole city is. I always say, if somebody dumps a ice chest out in a Kroger parking lot, the city shuts down, and we're kind of in that right now. So I got some time. I'm going to listen to some of these. I'm going to start with the Mark Goodfellow episode.
Yeah, that's a good one. Good. Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks,
well, Michael.
Alan,
thank you so much. I've enjoyed reconnecting with you and talking with you. Everybody, thank you for listening or watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please share us on social media, email it to a friend. Just help us get the word out. Check out Think Big by Michael Zellner. Michael is going to go conquer the podcasting world. I'm going to go get some justice. So thank you all very much for listening.